Good evening. Welcome back. Welcome in, whatever the case might be, to State of the Tigers here on PowerMizzou.com. Gabe DeArmond, Drew King, going to talk a little Mizzou hoops with you over the next, I don't know, little bit. We'll decide how long that's going to be when we see how active you guys are and how much you care. Because, frankly, Drew, like Billy and I were talking before you hopped in here, it only takes one basketball loss for people to be like, I'm just going to check out. I'll see you at the next game. Like, I can't
Mhm.
do this for a couple days. We'll be back when they play again and see if they bounce back.
Well, I mean, the season's over at this point, right? Like, just gotta pack it in. Let's go home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's keep this one brief, I guess.
No, the live show actually on Saturday night, I figured it out. It was 20 or 30 minutes of this is horrible and I hate this. And then it was a lot of okay, it's really not that big a deal. After the initial emotional processing, everybody handled it pretty well. Before we get into it, I want to invite you guys, comments, questions, whatever you got in the chat. We'll get to those second half of the show. Appreciate you being here. Like, comment, subscribe, and just as importantly, get in touch with James Carlton. He is our sponsor for this show every single Monday night. Drew's insurance agent, my insurance agent. Also sponsors some stuff in St. Louis, some NIL things. He's very active with Mizzou sports, guys. He's a huge Mizzou fan. So if you look, you need insurance. I mean, whatever your choice if you don't have it, I guess. But you were running some risks there. So assuming you abide by the laws of society and have insurance, give your business to a big Mizzou fan, a supporter of PowerMizzou.com. James Carlton, you can get in touch with him at carltoninsurance.net. You can call him at 314-961-4800. James is going to do his best to set you up. If you get a quote from him, he's going to donate $25 to Mizzou's NIL fund. Tell him that we sent you. I don't really know if that'll hurt your chances of getting a good rate or help him, but just do it anyway because we asked you to. Drew, uh, road trip to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Look, you asked me, and we've got to talk about it.
hmm
Like you've been to 5 games outside of Mizzou Arena this year, and Mizzou is 0-5 in those games. Like, at what point does Dennis Gates just come say, you know what, Drew, we appreciate it, man, but actually, like, we're gonna pay you to not come.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, Gabe. To be honest with you, they're a very analytically driven team, and the analytics show that I am not a good luck charm for them away from Mizzou Arena. So, it's only a matter of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, the I feel like you're gonna be in Nashville. And if they lose in Nashville, that might be the time to just say, Drew, you can't do this anymore, man.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have to find another way because we can't have you at we've got important games coming up. We can't have you doing this.
Yeah, no, and it would be totally understandable from their perspective, I think.
It is amazing as many different stats and analytics and things as Dennis Gates uses that he has not come up with the Drew King factor yet.
It should be like everybody's number
I
one.
want I want another score in this box score. Right next to the plus minus is the DKF. So
The newest metric sweeping the nation. Just
we could actually you could actually probably start a site and charge for it and just like put out the Drew King factor for every game in
yes,
America. Now you're only actually at one, so for the all the other games, your record's going to be 500. So
right,
yeah,
exactly. And
just like
now that
just
I
like
think
the
about it,
SEC,
Gabe,
man, not that good. You're 500.
now that I think about it, Gabe, because Mizzou's home record is really good, but that also means every other team's road record is not good with me in attendance. So it really is like the Drew King factor. It's a big deal for teams this season. Like,
Texas A&M is the only road team to win a game in which Drew has attended.
they're the only positive Drew King factor in the country.
Yeah, Texas A&M number one and DKF entering the NCAA tournament. Remember that. You guys are looking at the box score there. So look, we'll start briefly with this one, but we want to get to more big picture stuff. I mean, I don't know anything. We talked about it a little bit tonight, but at 48 hours to kind of think about this one. You talked to this and Mark Mitchell today. Any leftovers from Arkansas 92-85?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is like they had 18 turnovers, and that was really what hurt them defensively more than anything, just the amount of transition opportunities that they gave up. But even with 18 turnovers, they scored 85 points in the game. So they were still pretty efficient scoring the ball. They just needed to do a better job of taking care of it. And that's not something that's been a huge issue all season long. So it's something that they're going to keep trying to get better at. But I don't think that that's necessarily a red flag moving forward. It felt a little bit fluky in the moment.
Yeah, I'm willing to look at Saturday as a little bit of an aberration in that regard, a little bit of here's what happened on Saturday that hadn't happened all year, right? It was everybody identified this as a look ahead or as a letdown spot. Like
Yeah.
it was all over our board all week. I'm scared of this game because they're coming off this huge win. They played on Wednesday, so it's only a day and a half. Then they have the worst travel luck in America. A luggage cart apparently hits their plane and they have to bus to Fayetteville. And so all these things. And so everybody's going, it wouldn't be that big a surprise if they just kind of come out flat and don't play all that well. The thing is, every time we've thought that this year, they really haven't done that. And they finally did it on Saturday. It was like for the first time all year, this team was kind of what we thought it might be that night. Because most of the nights they've been better than we thought they would. Even when they've lost, they've been better than we thought they would. And Saturday was, I don't know. I think it was the worst performance of the season. Do you agree?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it.
I mean, like, I'm not going to say it was worse than beating Eastern Washington by 7 points, but you won that game. So I don't really care.
Yeah.
It was in a game that you didn't know the outcome going in. I thought it was the worst performance of the season.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that Texas is probably up there too, like only scoring 53 points on the road. Not great. But they also like were really good defensively in that game. So I think it's probably a toss-up between those two. But yeah, like if that's the worst performance of the season, I still think that they're in pretty good shape. Especially like considering what Arkansas has been for the last month now. That's a tournament team that they lost to. So, like, you'll live.
It is now.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and the only reason I put Saturday below Texas or above Texas as far as, bad performances, like Texas was just missing shots. It was nothing else. They played fine other than that. Like, I didn't think Missouri played well on Saturday. Yes, they missed shots, but also just so many just like turnovers that weren't even forced, and just complete lack of interior defense. And I understand why that was. Like, I understand Josh Gray was a part of it, but you play with who's there, and I just didn't think it. I didn't think it was a good performance. So before we move on to what they do with it going forward, a win over the number 4 team in the country, a loss on the road. What did you learn about Missouri in the last 7 days?
Honestly, like I'm at the point where nothing really surprises me with this team anymore. So like scoring 110 points against Alabama, I didn't know that they had that kind of offensive firepower in them, and getting to the free throw line, 80,000 times probably helped in that one. But like I think that we kind of know that Missouri can play with pretty much anyone in the country. And like you said, the Arkansas game was a spot where it was kind of a letdown, but it was still like not all that bad of a performance. And so like I think that you can still be pretty optimistic about what Missouri can do come March. And that's kind of, I guess, what stuck out to me the most is just like this is a team that's been pretty consistent all year. And I think that they've got a pretty good chance to make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, I didn't learn anything. I had something confirmed. And here's what I had confirmed. You're looking now at Drew wrote a story earlier today. We'll talk about it a little bit. Mizzou, one of 3 teams in the country that attempts 24 threes and 25 free throws. They really need to get that 25th three up. They got to get that average up just so there's symmetry there. But what was confirmed for me was every game the rest of the year, like Missouri can beat every team it plays. That includes every game in the SEC tournament and every game in the NCAA tournament. Every game in the postseason is also now losable. Like that's what these are the caliber of teams you're going to face. So like we've said, Missouri can absolutely make a Final Four because they can go beat 2 top 10 teams back to back if they're hot and if they're playing well on the right night. They also are going to be playing their first tournament game is going to be against a team that, while maybe not as talented as Arkansas, has probably had a very similar season to Arkansas.
Yeah.
So they can lose in the first round too. Like 47 other teams in the tournament, right? I think if we've got 68 teams, you've got probably 4 to 6 that you go, there's no way they're losing round 1, right? I mean, absolutely not possible. Yeah. And then you've got probably, 10 that you go, they can't make it to round 2. And that's about it. Everybody else pretty much is in that same boat of, you could make the Elite 8 and you could bow out on day 1.
Yeah. I will say this, though. I do feel like Mizzou's floor is higher than most, right? Like Mizzou can usually get away with a B- game and still come out on top against most of the teams in this
against mediocre competition.
Yeah. So every now and then they'll have what we saw in Arkansas, which was more like a C game. But I still think, like, for the most part, this team's been pretty consistent about bringing a B- or better game night to night.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would have given Saturday night probably a C-. All right, so going forward, South Carolina tomorrow night. I mean, look, I don't want to dive too. Congratulations to Jordan Butler for breaking the 0 for 31 or whatever it was. Congratulations to South Carolina for not matching what Missouri did last year. This can't be a loss. Like this 100% has to be a win, because if this is not a win, there you see the 24/7 sports poll. If this is not a win, Missouri ain't 5 next week. And the next time we do this show, I'll talk a whole lot differently about this team if they lose this one.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to count as a quad 3 game for Missouri, right? And when we talk about their tournament resume, a big highlight on it is that they don't have any bad losses, right? It's pretty much all quad 1. All 6 of their losses so far have been quad 1 games. So if you drop one to South Carolina, you effectively eliminate that talking point for Mizzou.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, we're done talking about them being a protected seed. We're talking about them being more of a 5 or a 6 in the NCAA.
And maybe lower, because this game can cost you a full seed line.
Yeah. And probably out of the double bye conversation too in the SEC tournament.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's a tough spot for Missouri, right? Because like if you beat South Carolina, it doesn't mean anything. You were supposed to beat South Carolina, but there's a whole lot at stake if you lose to the Gamecocks.
And I mean, they have not lost a single game like this year. They haven't lost a game that they were supposed to win, right? Oklahoma at home.
Yeah.
I think they were favored over Georgia on the road. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they were. I think by tip-off on Saturday night, they were an underdog. Like, I think every game Missouri has lost this year, they've been an underdog at tip-off.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. So, like you said, I think that we saw them pretty much handle all the blood donors in conference play, right? We saw them take care of California. I will say South Carolina is probably a pretty significant step above some of those teams, right? Like, where would you think South Carolina would rank if it was in the ACC this season?
Is it disrespectful to the ACC to say third?
No.
No, they would not be third. Like, but they would not be last. They would not be 1-13 or whatever they are.
Well, I
so
mean, like,
yeah,
they beat Clemson this year. Like,
right.
we can't forget that.
They should. I mean, they should have beaten Florida. They could have beaten Auburn. Now I haven't looked at their schedule as far as home road, so like I don't really know if they've done anything impressive away from home. But they have had some good games in their Columbia. But again, it can't be a loss. Like tomorrow night, and I look, I don't care if it's by 4 or by 40. Honestly, it just has to be a win.
Yeah.
That's at this point all that really matters. And I did look it up. South Carolina is 89th in the net, so maybe if they win here tomorrow by like 25, at least then maybe they could jump up enough to make it a quad 2 loss. I mean, look, if you're going to lose, just get blown out.
Yeah.
We're looking at the road schedule. Lost by 35 in Starkville. Lost by 3 at Vandy. That was probably their best. Lost by 20 in Norman. Lost by 11 at Georgia. Lost by 23 at Kentucky, 21 at Florida, and 14 at LSU. They had one okay day on the road, and that was on January 5th. They lost at Vanderbilt. So
Yeah.
I changed my mind. This needs to be double digits.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Ken Palm agrees with that as well. But here's the thing, Gabe, is like South Carolina's good enough that was a quad 2 loss for Texas because Texas was on the road, right? So like
Right.
it's not a pushover team. Like they have some good performances in them.
But on the road, it has been a pushover team.
Yes.
I mean, that's what the numbers say. They've only been close to winning one game. Oh, hey, injury report is out. I don't know if you knew that. Josh Gray not on the availability report, so that seems like good news to me.
I agree. We didn't really get a chance to talk with Dennis Gates about it at the press conference today, but I figured with it just being an illness, it wasn't anything too serious. So
here's the only reason I was worried about illness, because like we've seen what's happened to Illinois. It started out with that one guy on their team was sick, and then their whole team was sick, and now everybody's sick, and they just had their biggest loss in school history. And like they're gonna make the tournament, I think, but they look really, really bad. So the only concern with that was like you want to make sure that Josh Gray is 100% healthy, and whatever it was he had, he can't give it to somebody else. Now, look, we don't know. Maybe it was a migraine, right? I don't know what was wrong with him, but I'm just saying this is the time of year where people get sick, and if it
myself included.
Right. Yeah. You've been sick for a little bit. And so if it was the flu or anything like that, like my number one concern, if I'm Dennis Gates, is I don't want you in the building. I don't even want you talking to your roommates until we know you're okay.
Yeah. And I don't have this confirmed, but I'm pretty sure Josh Gray did not make the trip to Fayetteville. So if that was a concern, like they had him pretty isolated during the weekend. Gabe, before
he actually made the trip, he just wore the horse mask the whole time, so he couldn't breathe on anybody.
Yeah, perfect. But before everybody freaks out about it, what do you make of Trent Burns being listed questionable on the SEC availability report?
No, he was listed as out, wasn't he?
I thought it said questionable. Can we go back to the graphic really quick?
Billy, do we still have that? I'm pretty sure he was out. I make of it that Trent Burns is not going to play tomorrow night, nor any other this season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He can't play if they're going to redshirt him, right? That's the main thing.
Yes. And they're going to redshirt him, and we've known that for a little while. So, okay, bracketology, Jerry Palms came out this morning. Missouri's a 4 seed. Like, here's what I think happened last week. The people that put the brackets together, and I think the selection committee puts a whole lot of weight on who can you beat. And like, I know there was a tendency for Missouri fans, because I got a few texts and stuff on Saturday night saying it, to think that was a bad loss on Saturday night. Like, that was not in the terms that the selection committee views it, that was not a bad loss. That was just a loss. And I think it's outweighed by beating Alabama. And I think that's reflected. They did not move in the coaches poll, and they moved up a spot in the AP poll today to number 14. So I think that tells you people around college basketball care more that they beat Alabama than they do that they lost to Arkansas.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to look at it too. That's kind of how I viewed it in the SEC poll that we put out for 24/7 Sports. I moved Missouri ahead of Texas A&M because the Aggies dropped both of their games this week, right? So, yeah, I think that seed line wise, they're still right around the 4 or 5 range, and probably needed that Arkansas win to lock in as a 4 seed. But there's still more opportunities on the horizon for them. So I still think they're probably in the conversation to move up too.
So we've got two different conversations for the future. Number one, and let's keep this up, is SEC tournament and being a top 4 seed there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I broke it down mathematically in my 10 thoughts this morning. If Missouri goes 4-0, which is doable, they will be favored in at least 3 of these games. I'll be interested to see what it is at Vandy. I don't know what that line will be. But if they manage to win 4 games, I would be pretty surprised if they don't finish in the top 4 of this league.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty doable. Mizzou's got the easiest remaining schedule in the SEC right now, and that's probably helped by having South Carolina in there. But
yeah,
they're tied with Tennessee right now. Tennessee's still got to play Bama at home. They've got to play Ole Miss on the road. So those aren't exactly gimmies, right?
Right.
You compare that to Missouri, who has to take on Vanderbilt and Oklahoma on the road, and then Kentucky at home. Yeah, I think that Tennessee's going to hold that tiebreaker, but if Missouri goes 4-0, there's a pretty good chance they could sneak ahead of Tennessee down the stretch.
And Texas A&M's kind of same situation. I don't have Texas A&M's schedule in front of me, but same situation. Like if Missouri can go 4-0, Texas A&M probably not going 4-0 here. I think they're at Florida and home against Auburn.
Correct.
So like there is a scenario in which even 3-1 is good enough for Missouri because A&M, look, I think A&M loses at Florida and I think they lose at home to Auburn. That one doesn't concern me. The Tennessee piece is like, I think Tennessee's probably going 3-1 at least, whether it's Bama at home or at Ole Miss. Like, I don't think they lose both of those games. But then the other part of getting into the top 4 is if you can go 4-0, if Bama or Florida you lose twice, you catch them and you have the tiebreaker with them. And they both have very difficult schedules as well.
Yeah, I agree. And also Danny Ragland makes a great point in the chat. He says it's not the easiest remaining schedule if Drew keeps attending.
Well, good point. Good point. We didn't SOS does not factor in DKF. So yeah. So the other conversation we have, and Bill, if you can call back up that top 25 graphic at some point. The other conversation is seeding, right? One seed's done. I don't think 2 seed was realistic before Saturday, but 2 seed's done. It's not happening.
Yeah.
Right. 3 seed. I'm not going to rule it out. If they're a 4 seed today or the top 5 seed, I'm not going to rule it out. But what I'd rather do here is talk about the teams that Missouri's in kind of competition for a seed with.
Yeah.
Look, the top 6 teams in this thing are going to be Auburn, Duke, Florida, Houston, Tennessee, and Alabama. They just are. And I know if Missouri finishes ahead of Tennessee or Alabama in the SEC and is seated behind, I know people are going to be mad, but I'm just telling you guys, I pay attention to this stuff every day. I look at the brackets. I listen to the podcast. Those are going to be the top 6 teams.
Yeah.
They're going to be 4 1 seeds and 2 2 seeds are coming out of those 6 teams right there. Michigan State, I don't think Missouri can catch in seeding. Do you?
Nah,
Maybe they can.
I think that they're probably a little bit too good at this point to catch them there.
Yeah. St. John's, like, I think Missouri has a tough time catching St. John's because I'm just not sure St. John's has a game left they can lose.
Yeah. It's kind of the benefit of playing in the Big East and right. being the conference champion in there.
Like they've got Butler and Seton Hall, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, they're gonna win, and they're gonna win their league, so they're probably gonna finish like 26-4 or 27-4 in the regular
Right.
season, and then go into the league tournament. And I just think that's hard for Missouri to catch. One team that I think is generally seated above Missouri, that is behind them in this ranking, is Kentucky. I I almost wonder if that final regular season game a play. I think they're pretty close. If they can go 3-0 going into that game, I think they can be seated ahead of Kentucky.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Kentucky still got to play Auburn at home. They've been kind of win-loss throughout the season. Haven't had a 3-game winning streak since middle of December. So yeah, that regular season finale is going to have a lot of stakes to it, in my opinion, which are the best kind of games. But we've kind of both been a little surprised with where Kentucky's been ranked all year. And it helps that they beat Duke and Gonzaga in SEC play and then started off with that win over Florida. But it just hasn't. They've got some rough losses on there too. So that's kind of been the head scratching part with Kentucky.
So we've identified these 8 teams that we think are seated higher than Missouri. The top 8 teams in the AP poll we think are going to be seated higher than Missouri. I just want to run through the rest where I think it could be a question, and I'm just going to ask you, who you think the seed is come tournament time. Iowa State or Missouri?
Iowa State.
I think it'll be Iowa too. I'm not sure of their schedule, but Texas
Tech is looking pretty good. I'll go with them.
I think so too. I think Missouri has a hard time catching them, because here's the other thing about having the easiest remaining schedule. You don't have statement games left on your schedule.
Yeah.
Right. Like you do in the SEC tournament, but the thing about and we'll get to A&M in a minute, but the thing about Tennessee, okay, at Ole Miss, home against Bama, yes, there are chances for losses, but they're also really good losses that aren't going to hurt Tennessee.
Yeah.
The Arkansas loss didn't hurt Missouri. Losing at Ole Miss isn't going to hurt Tennessee. So Iowa State, Texas Tech, we think are probably above Missouri.
Wisconsin, probably same case. John Tonje looks really good right now, so I think that they're going to make it ahead of Missouri.
I think they will hold Missouri off. I don't know if I think they're a better team, but I think they'll probably be seated a little bit ahead. About A&M.
A&M, if we just talked about a situation where Missouri finishes ahead of them in the conference standings and gets that double bye. If they end up dropping those games to Florida and Auburn, I could see Missouri sneaking ahead of Texas A&M here.
But here's the weird thing. They were 2 in Jerry Palm's bracket last week. They lost to Tennessee. They're still a 2.
Okay.
So if you're competitive with Auburn and Florida, I think if Texas A&M loses 2 more games, I feel like I would, if Missouri goes unbeaten, I would seed Missouri ahead of Texas A&M. I'm just not sure that Missouri will be seated ahead of Texas A&M.
Yeah, and I don't have the full tournament resume in front of me either, so I don't know exactly what Texas A&M, what kind of advantages they have there. But as far as record-wise, I feel like that would be a little bit worse than Missouri to me.
Yeah, Clemson,
I would have Missouri ahead of, and I'll tell you why. Can I read you their losses real quick?
Yes.
Okay.
I know there's one to Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech in triple overtime at home. Lost to Louisville on the road. That one's a little understandable. Lost to South Carolina. Lost to Memphis at home. And lost to Boise State away. Yeah. So, those aren't really... those are games that probably Clemson should have won each of those.
They're 25 in large part because they're in the ACC.
Correct. Congratulations on beating, Georgia Tech the second time around, or Virginia Tech by 15.
Right. And that doesn't mean they're not a good team. I'm not saying they're not a good team. But when it comes to seeding, nothing they've done to me has them ahead of Missouri. So in the interest of time, look at those, the 11 teams that are behind Missouri. Give me your top 3 that you go, okay, these are the ones that Missouri's going to fight for a seed, or that Missouri needs to worry about being seated higher?
Honestly, it's Michigan and Maryland. Just because they're in the Big Ten, they're going to have opportunities, I think. But aside from them, I mean, we mentioned the Kentucky game, but I don't know that there's really any others that they should be too concerned about. Like,
no worry about Purdue or Arizona on your side?
Maybe, but like Purdue's at 9 losses, and Memphis is in the AAC, the American Conference. Arizona,
Yeah, I'm not worried about Memphis. They're like 40s in the net.
yeah. So, and Arizona, I don't know what they've done recently, to be honest with you, but
they lost 2 games last week, although the second one they lost to BYU at home on legitimately one of the worst foul calls I've ever seen.
Okay.
Like a foul with 1 point lead, a foul called with 2.6 seconds left, in which Arizona did not touch the guy. He made both free throws and they got beat.
So maybe Arizona is a team that could probably slide up there. And Purdue's obviously a talented team. They just have had some rough luck in the Big Ten.
Right. Like, I'm not saying those teams are seated ahead of Missouri. I'm just saying keep an eye. If Missouri ends up like a 5 or even a 6, those are the teams that you have to be kind of watching what they do the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree with
that. So we'll wrap this up and then we'll go to people's questions. What's your floor for Missouri seed?
I'd say, like, if they lose to Kentucky and they drop one of these road games that they have against Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, 6th seed, I think is fair.
I have a tough time seeing 7 coming into play. I think I will be surprised if they're higher than a 4 and surprised if they're lower than a 6.
Yeah. Like, if they're lower than a 6, it means they lost to South Carolina.
Yeah, and I think they have to do something a little disappointing to be a 6, honestly.
Yeah.
Which means 1 seed in the 3rd round. But honestly, look, if you get to the Sweet 16, no Missouri fan should complain about who they play. Like, the Sweet 16 for the first time in 16 years, you take your chances with whoever you get.
Right.
So, all right. Do want to remind you guys real quick before we get to questions and comments in the chat, get in touch with our buddy James Carlton. Again, his information, if you've been watching on YouTube, streaming across the bottom all show long. If you are listening on the podcast and can't see this, we're going to go ahead and read it off to you. carltoninsurance.net or 314-961-4800. That is James Carlton. He's always going to have somebody in his office. He might be on the golf course. Like, it's nice this week. James might duck out a little bit or might have to go watch some college basketball, but I promise he'll have some people there to take your call. So get in touch with them. Again, 314-961-4800. Get yourself a quote, and they're going to donate $25 to Mizzou's NIL effort. So, all right, Billy, if you can just kind of start throwing up questions or whatever from people from the chat. Colin wants to know, are you concerned about the defense after 98 to Bama, 92 to Arkansas? And in all fairness, far more points than Arkansas has scored against anybody else in the SEC.
Right. I'll say no. I think that Arkansas benefited a lot from just the number of turnovers that Missouri had in that one. And again, that's not something I think is going to be a big concern moving forward. And then 98 points against Alabama. That's what Alabama does to everybody.
Yeah,
so
that's like a middle of the road effort for Alabama.
Exactly. So, and like we were talking about earlier, the teams that take 24 3-pointers and 25 free throws a game, Alabama is one of those teams. So, I think that's pretty normal for the Crimson side.
And here's what I would say about the defense. Like, it's not elite. I don't think any of us have ever argued that they're an elite defensive team, right? They are good enough. They're a solid defensive team. I think Saturday, like you said, the turnovers was a big deal, and not having Josh Gray mattered there. Like, it doesn't matter that much on offense. It matters a little on offense, but where it really matters is on defense. I mean, you just can't ask Mark Mitchell. That's not who he is, to be that guy defensively standing up against a 7-footer. And look, man, I don't know that we talked about this on Saturday night, but I don't even think you can try to steal a couple minutes with Peyton Marshall at this point. I think it's got to be when Gray's out, you're going small, and that's it. Like there's no other option.
Yeah, Peyton Marshall looks a little too slow to kind of slide his feet and stay in rotation for the SEC right now, at least. And that's something that he'll get better at, I'm sure. But you also look at guys like Aiden Shaw, right, who didn't do a whole lot better against 7'2" Avicic. So, like, yeah, Josh Gray, I think, would have made an impact in that game.
Right, like Trent Pierce, he's 6'11", but he still weighs 108 pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what his game is. So when they don't have Josh Gray in there, the defense changes. And so now you don't have to play that way for 40 minutes, right? Because a lot of times when Dennis takes Josh Gray off the floor, then the opposing coach responds by going with a little bit smaller lineup.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see, again, the teams that are going to give them trouble are teams with athletic big guys. Well, teams with athletic big guys give everybody trouble. So that's not exactly breaking news. But like, not ready to say the defense is a problem, but it's clearly like, if you have to say what's the strength of this team, it's their offense. They're 8th in the country.
Right. They beat Alabama because they put up 110 on them, not because they held them to 98.
Right. And so, look, they score 80 almost every night. If they lose in the tournament, I think it's much more likely they lose, 75 to 70 because they miss shots than it is that they lose 105 to 100.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right. John with the Isaiah Mosley flashback. I can't do this. Let's keep rolling. What teams in the top 15 would you take Mizzou against on a neutral court?
So this is going to be like a second round matchup in the NCAA tournament.
Pretty, maybe second round. Ideally, not quite second round, but possibly.
Okay. It's a good question. I haven't really thought that far ahead.
Like, I'm just going off of kind of gut reaction in what little I've watched. I would pick Missouri to beat Clemson. I personally would pick Missouri to beat Iowa State. I don't think they would be favored. I've watched Iowa State some. I think Missouri is better than Iowa State. I think I would take Missouri over Wisconsin.
Interesting. I'd be fearful of the John Tajay revenge game, but that's just me. So here's what we know about Missouri, right? What's their kind of their biggest weakness? It's when the other team can be just as physically imposing in the front court, right? When they can bang with Josh Gray and Mark Mitchell. So a team like St. John's, who's got a 6'9" Zuby Ejiofor starting at center, like I think that they'd be okay against St. John's. But a team like Texas A&M or Tennessee, who's got guys who are thicker than Josh Gray and Mark Mitchell, like those are the teams that I would be fearful for Missouri of.
I hope we get to see Missouri, Tennessee in Nashville because I don't think Tennessee can shoot like they did ever again in that first matchup. And Tennessee might win the game. I'm not saying they wouldn't. They certainly would be favored. But I'd be interested to see that one again.
I would be too.
Because I think Missouri, like in Dennis Gates' time here, Missouri's played Tennessee really well.
Yeah, they have. And that game, again, like Tennessee had to have one of its best shooting nights of the season to pull it off. But a lot of the things that we were worried about for Mizzou in that matchup came to fruition, right? Like they got pretty dominated on the glass in that one. And so that would be an interesting matchup. Houston's another one I think that would not be a great matchup for Mizzou. I know they don't have necessarily the same height, but they just play a suffocating style of defense.
Well, and that's kind of the thing with St. John's, that like St. John's plays that Houston, Texas A&M style of like they want to beat you 60-59, you
True.
know. So it'd be interesting. But like here's the fun part of this conversation. At no point do I look at that and go like, just because we're not mentioning Florida or Alabama or Duke doesn't mean we think Missouri would stand no chance to ever win that game.
Yeah.
Like when you're asking who would you take on a neutral court, what I'm basically saying is, well, if they play 7 times, who do I think's winning a 7-game series, right?
Hmm.
Like even though Missouri beat Alabama last week, I think Alabama would win a 7-game series between the two teams. But the NCAA tournament's not a 7-game series. All you got to get is the one.
I wish it was a 7-game series. Imagine 110-98 7 times in a row.
But also imagine 68 games that were 7-game series. Like the NCAA tournament would last all year, which I
Sign me
guess
up.
wouldn't
Sign me up.
necessarily be the worst thing, right? You already want to let 326 teams in the tournament, so why not just make it an all-year event? It would be like soccer. Like sometimes we would have to ask, like, is this a tournament game or is this just a friendly? What are we doing? So, yeah. So, but that's the good news, right? Is that there's no game that you look at and say, "Hey, Missouri has no chance." Billy, I know you got to roll pretty soon. If there are any more questions you see, immediately throw them up. Otherwise, I'll handle comments and let you go do your thing. So, Reed says we're probably a 5 seed right now, right? Like it kind of depends on who. They're a 4 or a 5. It depends on who you look at, and they don't like Jerry Palm doesn't know. Joe Lunardi doesn't know. He's using data and best practices. I mean, bracketology is really the original analytics, right? I'm going to take all these numbers and I'm going to throw it into the computer, and it's going to say you're a 4 seed. But sometimes the underdog wins, and who knows, you might be a 6 seed when the 13 people in that room decide.
Exactly, right? It's going to come down to like which metrics do those 13 people favor. So like Joe Lunardi might be a little more reliant on ESPN's BPI, right? And Missouri doesn't rank super well in that metric, right? The NCAA tournament committee might say like BPI, who cares about that? We want to use Ken Palm and Torvik, where Mizzou looks pretty good. So it's all opinion based, right? But to answer the question, yeah, it's probably a 4 or a 5. I think Bracket Matrix had them as like the top 5 seeds, so that's kind of where they're at the moment.
Here's the question that I should have started the show with, because I really wanted to start the show welcoming everyone to a smoke-free edition of State of the Tigers. Jason's asking where the fire alarm is, and man, I think it was like Friday before that sound left my head.
It's still in mine, so
yeah. But anybody that was there, though, that was a legendary live show. Anybody that was there, so we gotta pause for Drew to create some fire.
There we go.
There was a little smoke.
There is a little bit of smoke.
So, there you go. Not quite as bad as say an entire suite catching fire.
And I just want to reiterate, I did not start the fire with the party popper. It was not
right.
me.
Blake said this morning he would take Mizzou over Bama on a neutral site. That's different. Blake is usually saying I won't pick Missouri at all because Missouri fans get mad at him for picking.
Yeah, he does. I think that they had Missouri up to number 4 in their power rankings, which felt a little high to me, but
ahead of Tennessee,
ahead of Alabama. Ahead of Alabama. They had Alabama all the way down to number 5 today.
Alabama number 6 in the country, number 5 in the SEC is quite a statement. But like again, I don't know. I hope Missouri and Alabama play again because that was the funnest game I've seen this year.
Yeah.
All right. Will winning the SEC tournament get a 2 or a 3 seat? Like people have to understand, man, the committee just doesn't really seem to care that much about the term. Do you think how good the SEC is this year changes that, right? Because like when you make a run through a conference, like theoretically, Missouri could have a conference tournament. They could have 3 games that would be 2 seed Tennessee, 1 seed Florida, 1 seed Auburn.
Yeah.
Like if you win those 3 games, and I'm not saying Missouri would, but if you win those 3 games, that has to affect where they can't just say, no, you're the same team we thought you were 3 days ago, right?
Right. So I would still say 2 seed might be out of reach considering where Missouri is right now. But 3 seed, like absolutely, you're in the conversation there. And like a win over Auburn and another win over Florida, um, uh, you're gonna have the tournament, the selection committee's attention with those two. I feel like so.
I
Um,
I think first of all, I think I don't understand why the SEC keeps playing their final on Sunday.
yeah,
Like every other conference said, no, we're not doing this because the committee never pays attention to it.
right.
So, like, I agree. I think you should go Tuesday through Saturday or in Nashville, and get everybody else a day of rest and all that. I will say this, and this is not a Missouri thing. If some team that is not among those top three, that is not Auburn, Tennessee, I almost hesitate to put Tennessee in there because, like, I get it, but they've lost 6 games in this league or 5 games in
Yeah,
this league. They're not in the same category to me as Auburn, Florida, and Alabama. I get that all the metrics say they are, but if somebody that's not Auburn, Florida, or Bama goes and wins 3 games in this tournament and is not clearly rewarded for it on Selection Sunday, then if I'm a coach in this league, I'm telling my team my starters aren't playing in the SEC tournament. It's a waste of our time going forward.
yeah, yeah. That's valid.
Yeah. All right. Booth and Tobacco, is Dennis Gates getting any traction for the coach of the year? Um, it's been mentioned. So national coach of the year, that's not going to happen.
Right.
And sadly for Dennis, I don't think SEC coach of the year is going to happen either, because I think like Bruce Pearl's going to be at least 16-2 in the best conference in the history of college basketball, and he's going to win it by a game or two. And he wasn't picked to do it in the preseason. I don't know how he doesn't win coach of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, Dennis Gates has a great case, right? And if this was an all SEC coach team, he'd be right up there. But like you said, going 16-2 in what's been a historically good conference, I just don't know that you can make an argument otherwise, a winning argument for somebody other than Bruce Pearl.
Yeah, and like I think Dennis would be second. And look, if Missouri wins out and they're 13-5, like I understand that there will be an argument. I just don't think he'll get it. Who would you give Pearl National Coach of the Year
I would, yeah.
over Rick Pitino?
Yes, I would. I mean, like we think about like there's gonna be 11, at least 11 SEC teams in the tournament this
Right.
season, and Auburn's beaten all of them.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well,
I
except
mean,
for Florida, but you know,
they're having an incredible year. There's no question. And I have said for 3 weeks, like I won't argue if Bruce Pearl is the coach of the year. I think it's fair. I think it's probably justified. But I think you can make an argument for Pitino. Like what he's doing there is pretty impressive, man.
yeah, for sure. And again, it's not to downplay like what Dennis Gates or Rick Pitino's doing, but
I'm gonna need somebody to explain this to me: how Bruce Pearl could win National Coach of the Year and Dennis could win SEC Coach of the Year.
I guess
I'm pretty sure that did happen for Frank Haith in 2012 when he went 30 and whatever. I think he won National Coach of the Year, at least I know he did by some outlets, and Bill Self was the Big 12 Coach of the Year. So.
Okay, yeah. So that's what it is. Is just that national coach is decided by the media, and SEC Coach of the Year is decided by fellow coaches. So that's how that could happen.
I guess I don't think it probably will happen. I honestly think it's better if we fall to 5th or 6th, so we don't have to play Auburn in the 3rd round of the SEC tourney. Look, for the NCAA's, like I'll listen to an argument a 6 seed's better than a 5, but in the SEC tournament, you just want to finish as high as you can because whatever. I mean, I don't know, you're playing good teams, and I don't. Drew and I have had this conversation over text. I put less importance on winning the conference tournament than Drew would, or than probably a lot of fans do.
Yeah, like I would say for Missouri specifically, it carries value just because they haven't done that before. And if you get bounced in the first round in the SEC tournament and in the first round in the NCAA tournament, like it's a little bit of a whimper to end the season, right? Rather than raising up a trophy and getting a new banner from Mizzou Arena. But yeah, for most teams, I would agree with you. Like the conference tournament doesn't mean too much.
Well, and it certainly doesn't mean like seeding. You just get you get as high as you can. If you can get in the top 4, you want to get in the top 4, because like playing in the first round and beating Texas or Arkansas, like that changes nothing. That doesn't help your tournament resume in any way.
Correct. And like you think about Auburn last year, right? Like, how much did it help them to win the SEC tournament?
Not.
Yeah.
But Alabama went to the Final Four after losing in the first round. So
exactly.
There's no correlation. Nobody's saying one causes the other. But like, I do think the SEC this year is a little bit different just because of how, like, it's not like you're just going and playing 3 games. Like St. John's in the Big East tournament will play like Butler and then UConn and then Marquette or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's fine. But like Missouri could theoretically play 3 teams better than any team St. John's will play in its conference tournament. And I mean, it's going to be like, that's going to be, if every team actually goes out and is trying to win it, man, Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Nashville should be amazing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure.
And hopefully you were there for the whole thing, because that would mean Missouri is still playing, and that would mean that the DKF has been demystified, and there is no truth to it. So, all right, guys, 8:00 tip-off tomorrow night. We'll be there. No post-game show because I look, the Sweets catch fire and weird things happen. We're gonna have to start calling Mizzou Arena like the building where the Sweets catch fire or something like that.
Yeah,
we'll just go with that. I'm sure Laird Beach and company will appreciate that sticking going forward. But we will be at the game. We'll have full coverage tomorrow night on the site. Appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. Like, comment, share, subscribe, do everything before you leave. Get in touch with our buddy James Carlton, State Farm Insurance at carltoninsurance.net. 314-961-4800 is his number. Tell him I sent you. Tell him Drew sent you. I don't care. Tell him Gerard sent you. Tell him Sean Williams sent you. Whatever. Just tell him somebody from Power Mizzou sent you. Get a quote from him. He's going to give $25 to Mizzou's NIL Collective. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us on Monday night. We will see you tomorrow.